Next on the Capital Cable, the high seas, grand maritime strategy, shipbuilding, Indo-Pacific machinations. With us, one of the greatest admirals ever in the history of the United States Navy, Scott Swift, joining Victor Cha on the Capital Cable. All that and more next on the 118th installment of the Capital Cable. All right, good day to everyone in the Republic of Korea, Washington, D.C., and wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the 118th installment of the CSIS Capital Cable. I'm your host and moderator, Mark Lippert. This week on the Capital Cable, a unbelievably well-timed discussion on maritime strategy, shipbuilding issues, Indo-Pacific machinations, and with us to discuss all of that and more, very special guest, one of the greatest ever to serve in the history of the United States Navy, and that's no overstatement, rather, Admiral Scott Swift. And let me quickly introduce him formally with his bio right here in front of me. He served in the U.S. Navy for more than 40 years, rising from his commission at AOCS, Aviation Reserve Officer Canadian School. That's the Richard Gere program, an officer and a gentleman, right?
That's right.
And he commanded at all levels, including FA-18 Weapons School, Aircraft Carrier-Based Squadrons, Carrier Air Wing, Carrier Strike Group, and of course the 7th Fleet, forward deployed to Japan. And I think where most people know him best is at Commander of Pacific Fleet until 2018, and contributed to all sorts of operational and policy issues at the highest levels of the military and government. Finally, I'd also be remiss if I didn't add that he is currently a founder of the Swift Group, LLC. He's been affiliated with all sorts of fantastic institutions, including MIT, the Naval War College, Center for Naval Analysis, and is a proud graduate of San Diego State University, Go Aztecs, and the U.S. Naval War College. Admiral, thank you so much for coming on the show. We've been after you for a while, and it's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Ambassador. Thanks for your patience and perseverance. It's unfortunate we're not in person, but it's great to see you again.
All right, outstanding. My wife likes to do things with me virtually these days, so I'd be careful about the in-person thing. And of course, again, welcome back to the show. And welcome to the show. And welcoming back into the show is Dr. Victor Cha, one of our regulars here. Of course, everybody knows Victor. He's the Vice Dean Emeritus at Georgetown University, now a university professor distinguished in all categories across that fine institution. CSIS president for the Geopolitical Studies Department, which includes the Korea chair, which he runs as well because he's not busy enough. Former Defense Policy Board under the Biden administration, NSC under the Bush administration, and busy combing the New York Giants draft selections to see how they're doing in training camp. Victor, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Mark. It's great to be back, and it's great to have the Admiral on the show.
Fantastic. All right, let's get into it. It's a deadly serious topic and unbelievably well-timed. And Victor, usually we would go to Admiral Swift for the first opening intervention and questions, but we have this extraordinary timing of a deal on, I guess you would say, that the tariff package, which is perfectly positioned with our show because it includes a massive shipbuilding component. But really to set the stage, Victor, will you walk us through what was agreed to last night, this morning, as we unpack the details? And again, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So, right, I mean, somehow the timing of the Capital Cable is always quite exquisite because it just happened to be at least the morning after the trade deal was announced. I mean, I think, both sides can claim some important victories out of it. I think for the Koreans, they were able to move from a 25% reciprocal tariff to 15% across the board, including, most importantly, autos and auto parts. That was clearly the top priority because South Korean automakers were already suffering 15-16% profit losses in the second quarter just because of the threat of the tariffs coming into place. So this was a top priority, and they are able to claim that they were able to do that. Importantly, the rate that they ended up with is not higher than Japan or the EU, because that would have been considered a failure. The Koreans tried to push for something lower, 12.5% to the very end, but were unsuccessful because the president said, no, everybody's at 15%. So that's kind of where that is. And then for the U.S., the big thing that they can claim is $350 billion of investment from Korea into the United States in U.S. owned companies and sectors as determined by the president, which will include shipbuilding among these things, as well as biotech, chips, and also energy. The only other number that was specified was the 100 billion in terms of LNG energy. So that's something that they can claim. And perhaps most importantly for the alliance, this is open the gates to President Lee coming to meet President Trump for the first time in Washington, D.C. We don't know. I don't know if there's been a date announced. We saw the president's social media post saying in a couple of weeks. So that's probably the most important thing in terms of the alliance, is to get these two leaders face to face with the trade issue off the table, at least for now, so that they can focus on other things that are important to the relationship.
All right, outstanding. Thanks for the lay down there, Victor. Let me come back to you. One follow-up question to get us into Admiral Swift's domain. It's the question of shipbuilding. My understanding is you've got $150 billion of the $350 billion pledged is targeted in the shipbuilding area, right? Details are scant, but A, if you wouldn't mind providing any insights you have on that piece, and then B, the Korean interests in that are, generally speaking, Hanwha, Hyundai, Maritime, and Samsung are the big players there, right? So please, anything to add, and then we're going to get right into Admiral Swift.
Yeah, so I mean, I wish there was more I could add. As you know well, with a lot of these, what are announced are framework deals, and the details are not really forthcoming. I thought it was interesting, as you all know well, there's the shipbuilding aspect of this, and there's the MRO aspect of this, and it sounds as though what the president has secured are commitments to South Korean investments in U.S. shipbuilding capacity or capability. But it's not clear to me what that means. Does that mean in terms of shipyards and MRO? Does that mean joint ventures in terms of shipbuilding? I mean, you and the Admiral will get into the details of all this, but right now it's not really clear exactly what that means. We have a top line number, but hopefully the details will be coming out soon.
All right, outstanding. Thanks, Victor. Really appreciate it. Now, I'm going to lift and shift over to our special guest here, Admiral Swift. And Admiral, let's pan up a little bit, right? We can obviously run into the details of Korean shipbuilding as we get there, but this is a show, as you know, that spends most of its time on the Korean Peninsula, geopolitical, geoeconomic issues, and shipbuilding obviously is a piece of that, but it's not something that I think our viewers follow on a regular basis. So could you start us out by talking a little bit about the fundamental drivers of the need for Korean shipbuilding in the alliance context, in that there is a lot of chatter in the Trump administration about the need for enhancements in shipbuilding, started, you can argue, by the Biden administration a bit as well. What is going on in the shipbuilding, arena, number one, and number two, how the needs of the U.S. Navy in that sector, what's happening there that is generating all of these machinations? And again, welcome to the show. Welcome to CSIS Capital Cable.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark. I appreciate that. And I'm really glad that this is a 3-hour show so I can fully answer the question that you asked. I say that somewhat tongue in cheek because the challenge is that it is really a wave top discussions when it comes to shipbuilding. So let me talk about this in three big chunks. The first chunk is that, in my opinion, the shipbuilding industry in the United States is a national security issue. It's not just about the number of ships that the Navy needs. I'm going to talk about that, but it's about the critical nature of the maritime domain when it comes to sustaining the economic power of any country. Um, so that's one piece there. The other piece to build out of it is it's not just the shipyards, the companies that own them. It's the infrastructure that supports them, that supply base, all the sub suppliers to those systems, all of them. Now, I will say in the United States, almost all of the shipbuilding is certainly the major builders is military in nature. That's not true. For instance, Italy has an excellent shipbuilding capacity, but much of it is focused on cruise ships. So there's a unique focus of shipbuilding in the United States, which further highlights this issue of it's a national security issue. And I think that was true of the focus in the Biden administration. And now I think it's certainly true of the increased focus of the Trump administration. And I think that's reflected in how Victor has characterized this trade negotiation in the context. It really is about the amount of money. I would focus, on that bottom line up front. And then with time, it will play out how that might look. And then I'd like at some point to talk a little bit about what that shipbuilding structure looks like and what the challenges are to the U.S. industry. But before I move on, the impact, the global impact of what the United States Navy does for free trade, for a free and open Asia Pacific, for the international rules-based order. This is consistently being tested around the world. Before we would talk about China. Now you've got to talk about what's happening with Russia and Ukraine. You've got to talk about what's happening in the Red Sea and the impact more directly with trade to Europe. You've got to take a look at what's happened with Iran. All these are immediate answers with respect to energy flow that affects everyone. And so it's not that I would push back on those that characterize the United States Navy doesn't need to be the world's policeman, but there is a leadership role for the U.S. To play here to ensure the continued stability that is so important to sustain the economic power of what we enjoy from liberal democracies around the world. That approach of negotiating, as Victor has pointed out, that we work our differences out through discourse and dialogue, not force and coercion. It's that element of the U.S. Navy that further enhances that discourse and dialogue as a backstop to say we don't want to fall back to force and coercion.
All right, outstanding, Admiral. I was going to get to this in the second part of the show, but we're leaping ahead. So I'm going to stay on this for a second, then come to the specifics of structure and in terms of the shipbuilding. But let's stay on the geopolitics for a second. Allies and partners, something that you know well, you've dealt with your Japan experience, obviously the Pacific Fleet, but not limited to just Asia. You mentioned the Italians' great European ally as well. How does that piece of the puzzle fit in to what you're describing in your laydown in the first intervention?
So it's a critical puzzle piece. I think that everything that I've talked about already is tied together with allies and partners, like-minded nations working together towards common interests. And yes, there's differences on the global stage, as Victor just pointed out, but how do we get after that? We get after that through discourse and dialogue. So there's huge opportunities. If you're talking about the shipbuilding piece, this is a watershed event that we're getting support from the highest levels of government, of both the Korean government and the U.S. government, to get after how do we optimize shipbuilding in the United States by leveraging the incredible capacity and capability of the Koreans. But I go beyond that. I look at AUKUS as an agreement from a submarine perspective. Now, there's a shipbuilding element there, but it is more about, it's beyond national security, it's regional security. It's beyond regional security when you bring the Brits in. It's really about global security. I'm seeing this within NATO as well. NATO is standing up and taking greater ownership of its own interests in Europe. I'm seeing it from a Five Eyes perspective. That's an intelligence security sharing arrangement. But sticking on the subject of Korea, Korea is stepping up and doing more with its own forces in support of its own defense. I'm seeing the same thing with Japan, with taking a look at some of its laws and regulations and culture with respect to using offensive weapons. They've got TLAMs now used in a defensive strategy. I don't want to overstate and characterize what Japan is doing as something other than what has characteristically been its approach. But this gets to your core point, and you know this as the ambassador in Korea. It's all about relationships. It's all about pulling together. And I'll close on my point. I'm actually here in Norfolk participating in a joint exercise right now. And so this isn't meant to diminish my joint brothers and sisters, but I think the understanding of relationships is so critical, and it's core to how navies think. We operate in a environment that is very unforgiving. It's the sea. It balances how we think and communicate with each other. A sailor in need, all ships respond regardless of its nationality. And we see that in the engagements and the connections, and it's how you leveraged both Korean military and U.S. military when you were the ambassador there in Korea, and building out relationships well beyond just the military relationship.
Oh, outstanding, Admiral. I spent a lot of time at the baseball games developing those relationships. At least that's what I told my mother, who didn't think she was getting her taxpayers' dollars worth. No, but well put on the alliance piece. Let me just slip in Victor here to go. We're going to go down, not down, but drill deep, double click on Korea in this piece that the Admiral just laid out. Victor, Lee Jae-myung coming to DC likely in 2 weeks. You heard Admiral Swift talk about how important the Koreans, both in terms of the defense industrial base, but also I think a larger actor on the geopolitical stage in upholding a rules-based international order. Where is President Lee on Indo-Pacific strategy issues, on these type of things that maybe one falls slightly outside of the bilateral alliance in terms of its traditional responsibilities? Victor, the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, we have to remember we're still at the very beginning of this administration. Usually a trip to the United States will be the platform on which we could hear more from the administration about how they think about the alliance, how they think more broadly about the region. As we all know, this government came into power under very unusual circumstances. They immediately got hit with a tariff crisis, which they had to deal with at first. It's very unusual for this negotiation to take place, for the announcement of a president to come without a special envoy delegation. Usually we see the special envoy delegation come first to talk about how President Lee is thinking about plans. So the short answer is we don't know yet. We do have some signals, though. The first is that the alliance still remains central, absolutely central to the Lee government, and they see real opportunities to build new areas of cooperation in some of the things that have already been featured in this trade agreement, and that is shipbuilding and LNG energy, right? Energy supplies. So there's a lot of focus on that. A lot of focus on continuing the work of the previous administration, both the previous South Korean administration and the previous U.S. administration, on trilateral cooperation between the United States, Japan, and South Korea. This was a very important and significant statement by the Lee government, given that traditionally more progressive governments in Korea have had a difficult time, frankly, with that trilateral relationship, but that clearly is not the view of the Lee government. The sort of big unanswered question really is China, and the position that the Lee government will take on China. We saw the previous government really go very strongly in the U.S. camp on China, making unprecedented statements about Taiwan and defense of Taiwan, making unprecedented statements about freedom of navigation in the South China Sea, these sorts of things. On supply chains, export controls, particularly on high-end technology, major strategic decisions made in the previous administration by Samsung and others, SK and others with regard to high-end chips and batteries, all these investments being made in the United States, not in China. And President Lee has signaled that he is looking to sort of, I don't know what the right term is, even out, rebalance the relationship a little. Again, we don't know exactly what that means, but he's certainly paid some lip service to that. So we'll have to see exactly what that means. But then again, the news today, of course, is we're announcing like a trade deal between Korea and the United States, not a trade deal between Korea and China. The United States comes first. And I think this visit will be very important in sort of helping to shape the direction of the Lee government. President Lee has not been president before. This is his first time as president, coming to the United States, the White House, for the first time as the president of your country. That's a formative experience, and so that will probably do a lot in terms of shaping the way he looks at things going forward. President Lee's also been very clear about what he calls, it's not the best moniker, but he calls it what, K-defense. There's K-pop, there's K-music, there's K-food, now K-defense, and which is shorthand for his interest really is in promoting Korean defense industrial cooperation, as well as arms sales to with the United States, with Australia, with Poland, with others. And so in that respect, this cooperation on shipbuilding will be a very new and important aspect of the alliance that will be, hopefully be beneficial to both sides.
All right, outstanding. I've already gone to my baseball joke once, but I'm going to come back to it. There's also the K Series. That's the World Series. But outstanding, Victor. Let me. I want to go back to the China point and bring the Admiral in. Admiral, obviously, a key animating driver of all of this shipbuilding conversation is the Chinese, right? In terms of what their naval activity and or Coast Guard, Gray Hall, White Hall activity, number one, and number two, their industrial base. Could you talk a little bit about the Chinese, and then, if you wouldn't mind, segue into what the U.S. is doing and why the structure of the naval shipyards and the Navy shipbuilding plan, how do those two factors come together?
The Chinese in the context of shipbuilding from an industrial base perspective, or more of what they're doing with that Navy that they do have?
Both, and I mean, and maybe
yes,
let me just set it up like a little bit more like when you and I were in government, right? We saw the emergence of this more aggressive strategy, right? Number one, and now number two, CSIS in an excellent papers and podcasts has really documented a lot of the the industrial might and state-backed resourcing of big Chinese shipyards as well. So full stop there, Admiral.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I appreciate the comment about CSIS. I was just there. It might have been last week or the week before. I can't remember now. Not that it was an important event, but it was a launch event for a war game that CIS had sponsored that had to do with blockade/quarantine of Taiwan and what were the implications that came out of that. So let me make 3 points to kind of back into this discussion. And I'll pick up where Victor was commenting, and up front, I want to say a disclaimer. Certainly, I can't come close to matching either one of you with your policy chops and understanding diplomacy and the economic nature of these challenges. But this is, I spent an awful lot of time when I was 7th Fleet Commander, in particular on Penn, getting to know these dynamics of Korean governance and the challenges and the opportunities that came along with it. I see it in a broader context across the region, and what I would suggest is I'm guessing what we will see is a more pragmatic approach from both an economic approach, a diplomatic approach, but not a military approach. Victor, I completely agree. I think the primacy is always going to be the U.S. alliance broadly, but certainly on the defense side as well, while trying to balance Chinese relations to include economic relations. Yeah, China is a critical economic partner and trade partner with Korea as well. So I'm seeing this across the region. We've asked the region to step up and do more on their own. Well, they're doing it. And consequently, they are more pragmatic based on these investments that they're making. Okay, so I completely agree with Victor, and that informs where we are in this discussion about what is the capacity and capability of China from a shipbuilding perspective. It's mass. It's their ability to quantity has a quality all of its own. It is well known. It's recognized for. I would say if you rank them, I mean, this is very subjective. I would have to put Korea at the top of the list, and that's not because we're having a Korean discussion here. But you name it, they can do it. They build high-end military ships. They build high-end commercial ships. It's extraordinary what they can do. I can remember I went and visited at NASSCO shipyard when I was a Pac Fleet commander, and the one in San Diego. And they had a teaming agreement with a Korean shipyard. I can't remember which one it was, to bring digital engineering into their facility. So this sharing is not new. It could be any number of things. I would put Japan right behind Korea for the same reasons. High tech capability, their ability to pump out ships in quality and quantity is amazing. And then next, I would put China from a quality perspective mainly, but the quantity starts to drop off a little bit. But it is, when people talk about the U.S. is behind, the U.S. Navy in particular is behind the PRC Navy. It is the fact of the matter is it's still about quantity and less so of quality. I don't want to go into too much detail there, and I'm not trying to diminish the challenge that presents. It's significant, but it's important to keep those things in context. Now, to your third point is, what is China doing with that Navy? I don't think that China has changed. I think that if you have a great story to tell, then that story is one that is communicated through discourse and dialogue. I've used that before. It's the moniker of diplomacy. There's a long line of people, I'm not talking about at the border, but a long line of people that want to come to the United States. It's still that shining citadel on the hill. Not a long line of people trying to get into China. They don't have a message that resonates with the world. I'm just stating the facts here. I'm not a China basher. But that's why they have turned to force and coercion in their business dealings for a long time, before they have had the economy that they have now. Well, now they have a Navy that backs up that force and coercion. We see it in the South China Sea. We're seeing it today around Second Thomas Shoal. We're seeing it in the West Sea, along the 124 line. Your audience may not be familiar with that. They may be more familiar with the agreed to areas that are economic areas, signed agreements with China and Korea. And yet there's violations that are occurring there based on even neutral observers that are observing that. So it's that PLAN Navy that provides that backdrop to back up that forceful and coercive approach to implementing China's desires outside their sovereign territory. I think I would suggest they do it within their sovereign territory as well, but that's a completely separate issue. I'm not one about domestic politics. I'm talking more about the international implications of what's happening.
So then, Admiral, what the next logical question that flows from that is asking you for your recommendation on how to what should we do as a nation to counter is probably not it's an imprecise word, but what should our response, or how should we continue to lead in the wake of this activity?
So I think from a broader U.S. perspective,
Yes,
so
absolutely.
we should continue the playbook. We have an outstanding message to share. And so I think we need to be careful that we don't adopt the practices that our adversaries are pursuing, that we continue to embrace this diplomatic approach backed up by a fully informed military. You know, when I as the Pac Fleet commander, when I would go visit countries, the first stop I made was within the U.S. embassy, and if I could get an audience with the ambassador, I would. And if not with the ambassador, I wanted to talk to the economic team, not just the defense team, but the entire team there, because the ambassadors is the direct voice of the president there. And that's what my role as a maritime commander was, to make sure I understood what the objectives of the U.S. ambassador were in that country, so that I could continue that path. We should continue that not only with our Navy, but with our allies and partners and friends. You touched on this earlier, Mark. This agreement that Victor just walked us through, that further reinforces how critically important our allies and partners are in the region. So I would say we need to continue the business that we've been doing, but not business as usual. We should look at, at every point, where's an opportunity to improve the processes that we've been relying on in the past? How can we improve them today and test them going forward into the future? And
Right.
it's the reaction of our allies and partners, not just the reactions of those that we're trying to deter.
All right, outstanding, outstanding. All right, Victor, let me bring you in on this point here. And you've been back and forth to the region a whole bunch this summer. You've also been to Europe. Talk to us a bit about how our allies and partners are feeling under the current set of circumstances, number one. And number two, given that we're starting to get some of these trade deals in the rear view window, which have caused a lot of angst and uncertainty in the region, I think it's fair to say, or at least caused this to be a critical topic of conversation. What's a likely dynamic shift, or will we still see continued turbulence in these alliances? Full stop there, Victor. The floor is yours.
So I think you're right, Mark, that for many allies and partners, the reciprocal tariffs have sort of eclipsed everything else. This has been the main issue that the administration has wanted to talk about. It's been the main issue that allies and counterparts have wanted to talk about. Just because the timeline is set by the White House was very short. First it was July, then it got extended to August, and it was the most important thing right in front of everybody's face. So this was the priority in all the negotiations, all the interaction between the U.S. and its allies. I mean, I think it's important that the Defense Secretary has already made 2 trips to the region, that Secretary Rubio made his first trip to the region for ASEAN Regional Forum to sort of level set, not on the tariff sides, but how the U.S. is thinking in terms of strategy going forward. I think there's a lot in it that resonates with what we've seen thus far with the United States in terms of the pivot or rebalance to Asia. I think for many key allies and partners, they're getting signaled about continuity more than anything else. With Korea with Korea, as I think we've talked about before on the show, there still needs to be a number of things that need to be worked out, because our presence in Korea is a little bit different from, in particular, the mobility of our presence in other parts of the Indo-Pacific. But again, we may be able to now have that discussion now that the trade stuff is kind of been taken off the table. Now that the August 1st deadline has been taken off the table, this really does open up some space. Well, for one, for the 2 leaders to meet face to face, which has not happened yet, and we all know that that's very important, and it's particularly important with the Trump administration, the personal interaction between the leaders. But removing sort of this August 1st deadline, at least for now, gives them the space to talk about other things, whether that is China or North Korea or Korea doing more on the global stage, or trilateral cooperation or shipbuilding or any of these other things. So So I think that's something that we're seeing happening with Korea in the last 24 hours. It's something that we're seeing happening with Japan. And you go through the list, Vietnam, Indonesia, right? All these countries. So, it's, to me, I mean, personally, it's not the most ideal way to approach allies and partners in Asia, but, the president is the president for a reason. And this was something he cared about very much in his first term, and he clearly made it the number one issue he was going to interact with international partners in his second term. And it was his way of sort of rebalancing all of these trade relationships because it was important to him, right? And he views it as very important to the United States. And there appears I mean, he has clearly shifted the paradigm on this. We're now not talking about, we're not the basis of discussion on trade is no longer about zero tariffs. It's about a new tariff line that has been set by the United States at 15%, whatever the number is, between 15 and 25%. And allies and partners are accepting that as the way that we need to move forward, but also looking for an opportunity to talk about some of the other issues in the alliance. And so I think that is a good thing coming out of this flurry of trade deal activity that we've seen over the past couple of weeks.
All right, let me go one follow-up to you, then back to Admiral Swift. We got about 10 minutes left. Just a comment, this tariff numbers will be interesting as these court cases on IEEPA wind their way through as well. That will be interesting for another topic, but just a quick comment there. Now that the trade issue, I wouldn't say has subsided completely, but perhaps is not as white hot as it might be with some of our allies and partners, where do we find ourselves in terms of U.S. policy on an Indo-Pacific strategy? And I ask this question because, at least to my mind, I see snippets in the press, don't know their validity, don't want to endorse them, but you see talk of telling the Brits not to come through, right? Focus on Europe. You see some back and forth on different neoconservatives, their status in the administration. Are they up? Are they down? Right? All of that. Are there divisions? Is there a unified strategy, Victor, going forward? What's the state of play right now as we come in perhaps to sharper focus on security issues in the Trump 2.0 administration?
I mean, the Admiral can speak to this as well. I'll just to give a couple of points. I mean, I think the signals right now are a little bit mixed that are coming out of the administration. On the one hand, there's a very clear focus on continuity, particularly when it comes to strategic competition with China. On the other hand, what we were also seeing previously was an effort to not just talk to Indo-Pacific partners, but European partners and others about the importance of stability in Taiwan Straits, freedom of navigation in the South China Sea, all these things. In my recent trips to Europe, the conversation has all moved, based on signals they're hearing from Washington, to conventional defense and deterrence of Europe, and less of a focus on encouraging European partners to play a larger role in Indo-Pacific security. But I think a lot of this is still, I mean, I would say at the same time, the Secretary of Defense's speeches and statements when he has been in the region have clearly signaled continuity in terms of how the U.S. is organizing allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific with regard to the competition with China. So I think a lot of this still needs to be worked out. I mean, we'll get the National Defense Strategy sometime in the fall, which will be a very important document in terms of that. It'll be a document that creates an action forcing event to, work out some of these debates within the interagency. But the bottom line is that I think while the current administration here in Washington has been focused very much on tariffs, the defense and deterrence message that's being received by the region is not one that is weaker, for sure. It's one that is still quite strong and consistent, and that's an important signal.
All right, outstanding, Victor. Admiral, the floor is yours to obviously
Yeah,
comment on it.
thank,
Victor, so thank you.
yeah, thanks. I'd like to, well, I'll start off with that. And there's three other points that I'd like to make quickly here, just in the interest of time. And what I would say is, as I talk to allies and
We can
partners
go.
in the
We can go
region,
for 3 hours if you like. I'm just kidding.
yeah,
I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
I may need to do that. Careful what you ask for. Is one of uncertainty, is that these conflicting signals. Now, I'm heartened by the fact that we've got someone with as much experience as Bridge Colby does in the policy shop there in OSD. So very, very well informed, and that's a positive thing. But I would have to agree with HMS Prince of Wales steaming through the Pacific, soon to make a port call in Tokyo, and engagements that she's leading a major joint exercise down in Australia now. So, and the Germans are back with in a meaningful way. The French have always been here. The Brits are back on a regular basis here. I'm talking as if the Indo-Pacific. So I think it's this uncertainty piece and clarity of messaging, I think, will come over time. At least I'm hopeful it will. Let me go back to one thing on shipbuilding. Actually, 3 points on shipbuilding quickly. When I think about shipbuilding, when you think about ships, I think about what I would describe for this audience as a sea frame, as if an airframe. What is the ship structure itself? And this is where people's, well, if I place China at number 3, where would I put the U.S.? The U.S. is down around 7 or 8, but it's based on volume. It's based on the number of ships that it can produce. So you look at the sea frame itself. The U.S. no one can build a warship like the U.S. can. The Koreans can't do it. The Japanese can't do it, bar none. And then when you add the weapon systems that go into it, they're even further behind. And then when you add the sailors that bring that ship to life and actually fight it, or in phase 0, supporting ambassadors or whoever it may be around the world, nothing can compare. So that's the ship part. And I don't have an MBA in shipbuilding, but there's 10 different things with any manufacturing piece, and I would say there's 4 that are particularly challenged in the U.S. One is floor space. We don't have enough shipyards. We don't have enough dry docks. We don't have enough pier space to build that to the quantity that we want to. The quality is there. Huntington Ingalls and the rest of them, they've got that quality down. The other is labor force, and we're seeing this across the United States. It is a high-skilled labor force that builds ships. Huntington Ingalls has invested a ton of money in this. They have developed a teaming arrangement with Newport News Community and the United States Navy to increase the quality of housing in that region so they can keep the workers around, make it a place that they want to live and stay committed to. So the labor force is an important point. Supply chain, we talked about that. There is one company that builds the air conditioning system for our carriers. They're up in New York. It's a one-off. So if we start to diminish that, or the supply chain interdicts that, it puts us in a difficult position. So the supply chain is very fragile because shipbuilding, there are very unique pieces that go into shipbuilding that are not marketable elsewhere. You can't, if you're building a widget for a ship, you're not going to sell that widget to an auto company or someplace else. It just doesn't fit. And the last thing is stable funding. And this is where Congress can help. CRs are killing us. Shareholders, they are not going to make the infrastructure investments unless there's some promise of a return on investment. Those 4 points are what we need to work on in shipbuilding. Jerry Hendricks and those folks that are working this within the administration are just the right folks to go work it. That was the second point. The third point is moving away from shipbuilding. I want to come back to Victor's point of trilateral information sharing. This we have to work through. This is a regional security risk that the U.S. can only bilaterally share information with the Japanese and bilaterally share information with the Koreas, with ROC, when we face a common threat with North Korea. So this Jasomia wasn't enough to tie this together. So Victor, I'm completely on board with that. And then the last thing I'll say is about relationships. There's a term that's stuck in my brain. I'm no master of foreign language, and it's kapshi kapshi dad. We go together. It's just baked into the relationship between the U.S. military and the ROC military, and to the people in government work together. So I'll stop there, Mark, and turn it back over to you.
No, fantastic, Admiral. I want to end it there, but let me just do one follow-up question on your shipbuilding points. You have 4 sub-bullets. Quickly, just kind of a yes or no, or a 15-second answer. It seems to me during this conversation, you feel our allies, especially the Koreans and Japanese, could help ameliorate, address some of those shortcomings. Fair point.
Huge,
Yep.
huge. And Victor, I would tell you this is they don't have to build the whole ship. They can build pieces of the ship, and we build submarines, halves in 2 different places in the United States, and we bring them together. There's work. We can learn how to manage our workforce better. We can learn how to manage floor space better, more efficient use of the space we have. It is huge. That's why I say it's about the total amount of money. There's a ton of things that we can spend that money on in the United States to make us more effective and efficient. And we can leverage the capability and capacity that our Korean friends have to help us with actually building ships there or ship modules there that could be shipped to the United States for final assembly.
All right, fantastic. And I'm just going to add one piece. Look, in a previous life, I used to work for Boeing, and the amount of work that the Japanese do on Boeing commercial aviation and the supply chain and the complexities and the expertise and the engineering, it's just, there's a reason that Boeing has invested so heavily in the Japanese over the years. So let me just end there. Admiral, thank you. Outstanding. We were well worth the wait, and I'm glad we were able to persuade you to come on to our show. This was a tour de force. We'll have to have you back when schedules align. And thanks again for coming on this show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's great to see you and Victor again. And Victor, I really appreciate the insights that you shared here. Very valuable for me.
Victor, I wholeheartedly agreed with almost everything the Admiral said except for that last point. I thought it was a last point. I'm kidding. Of course, well done as always. We really appreciate it. And thanks again to all our viewers out there. And we'll see everybody in a couple weeks. Thanks again. Bye-bye.